to talk about Dark Sisters. I was just saying when people were joining that this was one of my favorite books. It's dark, it's beautiful, it's sad. I mean, it's pretty much everything I want from horror. Can you maybe kick us off just talking about the inspiration for it?
Yes. So Dark Sisters, the inspiration was kind of a multi-tiered series of things that happened as I was doing the thing the authors do after they've already had taken getting a book off the desk where you go, what now? I wish I was one of those writers who had constant ideas, but I just am not. I will get an idea and I will sink my teeth into it for a really long time, but I'm not the person who is constantly like, oh, I have so many, which one? So after my first novel came out, Such a Pretty Smile, I felt kind of stuck because I had written a completely different novel. And then my agent told me, hey, fundamentally nothing's wrong with this book, but I don't think I can sell it just because there are so many other books on the market that are so similar right now. And she was right. But there was an entity in that book that so I'd already used the Dark Sisters as an entity, and I really couldn't let that go because of what it represented, of how they encapsulate the feelings and what happens when we try to hold our shame and our guilt inside and we don't ever really address it. And so I didn't really want to let them go. And so at the time, I was doing Julia Cameron's morning pages that she writes about in The Artist's Way, just to try to get some kind of creativity flowing. And I was journaling quite a bit. And I started to journal a lot about my experiences of growing up in a fundamentalist Pentecostal religion, and particularly my experiences with purity culture. And I had a memory that came back really vividly one day that I was writing about a time that my mom had dropped us off at some lady in the church was babysitting me and my younger brother. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I wasn't that old because The Little Mermaid had just came out, and even though we weren't allowed to watch movies of someone inevitably, you see it somewhere. And so I was obsessed with The Little Mermaid. And my mom had picked up for me at a Kmart a Little Mermaid swimsuit, a one-piece swimsuit, and I was so thrilled to wear it. And so this woman's babysitting us. They have an above ground pool, which is like white trash heaven. And I go and I put the swimsuit on. Again, I'm 6 years old. I come out and the woman looks at me and says, like, honey, that's not going to work. I have a husband and two sons. And it was weird revisiting that memory as an adult because I had never processed that as a child. In my childish brain, I immediately knew what she meant. Of, oh, well, yeah, they're gonna look at me because I'm a woman. I wasn't a woman, I was a little girl. But she marched me back to her bedroom. She got me a big shirt out of her husband's drawer. And so I wore that to swim, and I was heartbroken because I was really excited to wear this swimsuit. But I was writing about that, and then I was writing about my experiences with going through my own purity ball, which is mentioned in the book, and kind of all of these weird things that happened when I was a kid, and all of these expectations that were put on me about being modest and dressing appropriately and doing everything within my power to make sure men didn't sin because of me. And so I'm writing about all of that. I have these idea of the Dark Sisters as an entity in the back of my mind. And then within that same like week that I had written about all of this stuff, Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I was so angry. And I went, I don't have anywhere to put this. Like where do I put all of this frustration right now? And that was where Camilla's story started. And so I said, okay, I think I want to write about parody culture from the perspective of a preacher's daughter who is incredibly privileged because I had also just watched HBO's documentary The Way Down, which if you haven't seen is worth the watch. It's about, you may have seen her. It was this woman, she led a church, she had hair to here, like super teased hair. And she believed that, or her entire structure was built on the idea that Jesus doesn't want you to be fat. And so she had this religious structure where she would say, like, okay, well, if you just pray a little bit more, you'll lose weight, and then God will love you because you won't be fat anymore, and your husband will love you because you won't be fat. It was awful. But they were very privileged. It was in my church that I grew up in was a mega church. That church was a mega church. And so you have these really conflicting ideologies of all of these things you're told that you can't have and you can't do, this kind of scarcity structure. But then you also have the idea of materialism and prosperity gospel as being very, very important. And so I start writing from the perspective of Camilla, and then slowly the story started kind of coming together of we have a town that's incredibly prosperous. Why is it so prosperous? Can there be a more insidious reason that it would be really, really prosperous? And as I started to delve into that, and I kind of started to get the story under me, and I took it to my agent, she says, "Great, great, great, great. You need another timeline, though." I'm like, perfect. So, if you're going to tell this story, I think we need the origin. You need to tell the origin of how all of this happened, because I was starting to develop the idea of the curse and how it afflicts only the women. And so that was when Anne Bolton's timeline came in, and looking at the foundations of why all of this would have started. And then from there, it was getting all of that story together, taking it back to my agent. She goes, yeah, 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 you need another timeline. And then Mary Shepard's timeline came in because she said, you really want to see how these things unfold over time. And so slowly but surely, in looking at all of these very similar themes and how they are impacting these distinct timelines, everything started to come together. And it was a long journey, but they eventually I got them all to the best of my ability to lock in. So
I think you did a great job. I mean, I'm really impressed when, especially during my reread, of how you've woven in each storyline into itself, because I can imagine it's very difficult when you have two alternating timelines. You've got three, and you also have this overlap in characters with Vera and Ada. Can you talk a little bit about Vera really quickly? Because I love her as a character, because I feel like she's a good ally to Mary and her storyline, but then she's also, I feel like, almost another mother figure to Camilla in her kind of storyline as well.
right. And you hit the nail on the head with that. That was really what I wanted Vera's character to do, was that she is the bridge between those two latter timelines, to show how impactful a decision you can make when you're younger can then how you might end up spending the rest of your life trying to rectify that. And how a lot of the time in our attempts to fix those problems, we might not go about it the correct way. Vera thinks that she's doing the best that she can just by being there and listening and watching and kind of making sure that Camilla is doing the best that she can, and that she has to have a realization at the end as well that everything that she has done up until this point has been about safety. And so that was really what I wanted Vera's character to be about, of that she's the voice of reason that is about safe. Of I want us to be safe. I want us to be comfortable, and how that can sometimes not necessarily, well, maybe undermine is not the correct word, but can sometimes deteriorate these forward steps that we try to make, just because she's afraid. And that she has to kind of grapple with that later on in life, of I was afraid of the consequences of standing up and doing the right thing by my friend and for myself. And because of that, I've suffered, and I've suffered greatly. And now I'm getting to witness a new generation going through very similar things that I went through, and I'm still afraid. And I think that that's the place that a lot of a lot of women sit in, is that fear. And so I very much wanted a character who symbolically had all of those things in it, to also show that the path, that you can have a path forward, of that she can move past that fear, because that, I think, is also a really thorny kind of place to exist in, when rights are being threatened to be taken away, and you're like, well, I don't want to hurt, and so I'm just gonna step back. So
Yeah.
she it hurt to write her a lot of the time because I wanted her like, girl, stand up, but it was a necessary thing to keep her in that space, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually about that if it was difficult because she does really seem I mean, I feel like if I knew her, I'm like, oh, she wants to do the right thing. But I think, she's understandably very afraid to do that. I think, especially after seeing kind of the consequences of, Mary and then her being sent to the retreat, I understand that fear. I thought it was interesting too, though, how timing plays a part in this book because I think at one point Mary's like, maybe if I was born at a different time or somewhere else, like things would be different. And then we flash forward to Camilla in 2007, and you're like, I don't think it would be that different for Mary. I mean, do you think that
Right.
Mary's outcome would be any different in 2007 in this community than it was then?
Right, right. And that was the big heartbreak for Mary is that she has this thought of maybe and the thing is that no, it wouldn't have been different
Yeah.
because it's not a product. The limitations placed upon Mary are not a product of her time period. They are a product, well, they are, excuse me. They're not strictly a product of her time period. They're also a product of her location and the lifestyle into which she's been born. Um, and as progressive as time and as culture can become, the further on we go, that doesn't mean that everyone moves along with it. That is still something that is very alive and well today of this kind of prejudice against anyone who is any different from what is these very strict things are laid out in whatever holy book this person is, using as their guidelines. Um, and so that was that was equally heartbreaking in that moment to have Mary say that and no, it wouldn't be any different for you because I mean that's kind of what happens with Brianna of we're in 2007 and she's telling Camilla to her face, things are not the same from you as they are for me. You just don't see it. And that's part of your ignorance that you have to get over. So yeah, that was no, I don't think it'd be any different.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that scene between them because I think Camilla seems aware of like kind of what she's being told is kind of crap. I mean, I think she's like, not really taking what her dad's saying to heart. But she does kind of live in a different reality. I mean, she certainly is oppressed to some extent, especially by the religion part, but she could have it a lot worse. And I think that that's something that Dark Sisters in particular really does a great job at kind of expanding on is I feel like you have different layers of like women and how they're viewed. You have sort of our baseline for how women can be treated, and then you add in religion, and then you add in race. I think geographical like differences somewhat come into play. I mean, I'm from the South. Like I think
Mm,
we're a little bit, expected to be maybe more modest than people elsewhere, and
mhm.
religion probably plays a part in that. And so I really did like that scene where she's telling her like, you'll be fine. Like your daddy will save you. It's not the same
Yeah.
for you as it is me.
Yeah. And that scene was really, really important for me to include in that moment because for for all of the things that Camilla is going through, she's still incredibly sheltered. And she needed to have that realization. I had the thought of thematically, if I'm going to do what I want to do with this book, of this idea about acceptance of light and dark and taking the things that you are ashamed of and saying like no, there's no reason to be ashamed of these things and being able to have them coexist with all of it, she had to grapple with that. And so that is the big lesson because I think it's so easy for people to do this thing where, well, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't get me at my best. And I'm like, that is bullshit because that's not just a carte blanche, invitation to act like an asshole all the time and just say, well, it's me. And I'm owning it and that's just who I am. And it's no, it's about being willing to be uncomfortable enough to accept that you've done something wrong or that you interpreted something in the wrong way or that you're ignorant and that Camilla needed to have that moment. And then to accept it and say, yeah, I don't know everything. And I have to recognize that there is differentiations in treatment between me and you and that I'm sorry. And that's what true acceptance of the self is. If it's not just, well, I got shitty parts to me and deal with it. It's I am okay with being uncomfortable enough to say I was wrong and I'm sorry and I'm going to fix it. And so I worked on that scene for a really long time, probably longer than I needed to, just because I wanted to make sure I got it right. Because it could have very easily been, Camilla just defensive and that's it. And then they're mad at each other and you have that and that's all. But that conflict has some sort of resolution, has a purpose other than just pointing out Camilla is privileged.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, Camilla's response to it too, because I think it is kind of always in the back of her head after that conversation, and I do feel like it was like a good motivator for her too, to kind of like I've got to take action. Like now my friend's impacted by this.
Right.
I really appreciated her being able to like stick by her friend. I can't imagine how like lonely it would be in this community without having someone to talk to like that.
Right, right. Yeah. Especially like a genuine friendship, not just
Yeah.
the kind of surface level friendships that tend to happen in communities like that.
Yeah, yeah, very rampant.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Florence and Anne? Because I'm interested too in your take because it really struck me when I was reading this how everyone, it seems like in this book, is really trying to take away women's rights and choices in their life. But Anne kind of, I mean, it's not really inadvertently, she kind of purposely does that to Florence. And I think it's heartbreaking because not it's her mom, but also it's you're like, oh, this is like almost like woman on woman crime to some
Yeah.
extent. I mean, was that a difficult thing for you to write and do? Did you grapple with it?
I I don't know. Okay, so I think it was difficult in figuring out how I was going to make it happen because I knew the betrayal had to happen because that was going to be the catalyst for the curse.
Yeah.
Is that betrayal is what kicks everything off of. And so I really went back and forth for a long time on how strong do I want to make that? How intense do I want that betrayal to be? Because it is a very, motherhood is tricky and for a multitude of reasons, but I think because you look back, you do the best that you can. And this again, this kind of goes back to some of the theme stuff that I was really wanting to hit in the book. You do the absolute best that you can, but then there are going to be times where you look at something that you did with the best of intentions and recognize that it wasn't the right thing. And so Anne feels compelled to lie about Florence and to break off that engagement so that she can make a clean so that Florence will go with her. She thinks that she's doing it to save Florence's life, and so she does this really horrible thing, this kind of really big betrayal of Florence's trust and her love and her livelihood. But she thinks that she's doing it for all the right reasons. But sometimes when you make those decisions, it creates further problems. You inadvertently push that person further the other way. And certainly I don't think she ever imagined that it would come out or that Florence would ever find out. But that's the problem with secrets, right? Of you never know. And so with that needing to be the catalyst for everything that comes after, I knew I wanted it to be the women on women crime because that's the thing that I think is this big snake. It's like this Gordian knot of nasty where we do it sometimes without even realize that we're doing it. Of this kind of internalized misogyny of Florence has it toward her mother. Her mother is kind of inadvertently repeating patterns of harm and trauma, and that trickles down, and it never really goes away. It just wears a new outfit and then becomes some kind of new hurt. And I I did really like playing though in the kind of ironic space of the puritanical based religion being the bad guy and or in that or that they are the how I'm phrasing this wrong that even though like Florence does the bad thing of that I can't. I've lost my train
I
of
think
thought.
I think
I'm
I know what
talking
you're
around it.
saying. No, I mean it's interesting because you think that you would think that it's the that Florence's religion is like kind of the driving bad force behind
Right.
this.
There we go.
But really it's she's I mean she's casting magic kind of she doesn't think that's what she's doing, but that's what she's doing that kind of sets off the curse. It's not her praying for the curse. She's just replicating what it feels like Anne's doing, but her intentions behind it are not pure. So the it's she's cursing them. Yeah, I thought I liked that. I thought that that was like a nice twist because you're expecting her to like almost have them like burned at the stake. I mean, I think that's what you're expecting with witches, but really it's like she's kind of just using their magic against them at that point.
Right. Yeah. And that was where I thank you. My brain was like, find the word, find the
No,
word.
it's
But
okay.
that kind that irony of it's the puritanical force that enacts the magic. I mean, you don't really. And so yes, there we go.
No, I love that part. And I think it makes it even heartbreaking when you realize like, oh, Florence is now part of this curse too. She's not immune from it, and like now her her daughter is, and so
Right.
on and so forth. Like they can't escape this. I think it's another unintended consequence of like your decision that she wasn't really thinking through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the heartbreak of generational trauma is sometimes you don't intend for
Yeah.
things like that to come up, or you do it with the intent with one intent in mind and it just expands rapidly.
Yeah. I want to talk about Mary and her love story a little bit because Mary and Sharon I think are my favorite plot in this
You
book.
do.
I feels like a really bright spot in a book that is very heavy. I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I love this book, but even when Mary feels uncomfortable with it, it still feels like she is being highlighted and really like shown a warmth and love by Sharon that she doesn't feel from anyone else. I mean, can you talk about writing that love story into a book that is pretty heavy like Dark Sisters?
And that's a wonderful point of, and I wonder, and I loved Mary. Mary was my favorite character, right? And for so many reasons, but that very well could be why, is because that did give me some light moments and some really warm moments that just didn't exist elsewhere. And it was very important for me that Mary experience not just an answer to her attraction to women, but that she has genuine love. And that because I knew I was going to take it away. And that was and I knew it was coming and it hurt really bad to know that that was coming, especially when there is so much tenderness and there is so much kind of recognition, soul recognition between Mary and Sharon. But it was such a delight to live in that world and follow them and be in the moments with them as they were kind of coming together and there was in this learning experience that Mary was having and this kind of like awakening that she was having, but that I knew that warmth needed to exist because it was going to go back into the really awful place. Um, but man, I loved writing those scenes. I that first the first scene where they go to the cafe. That was my I lived in that scene, I think, for a week just because I didn't want to leave. I was like, girl, you got to go. You got to keep going. You've got a deadline to meet. And I went, no, I want to stay here. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do, and this is somewhat tangential, but my very first reading love ever was romance. And simply because in my little tiny school library that we were allowed to check books out from because you couldn't read non-secular books. They had a little section of Christian romance for the high school girls that they were allowed to check out, and I would sneak them out, even though, and I was in elementary school, and just gobble them up. And so I think it was a really wonderful revisiting to some of those things. A little different, but it was nice. I really loved writing the both of them.
I love them so much. And the passages about them are just so beautifully done. I mean, it really they're very lyrical and even Mary's fears, like you just express them so beautifully that I really fell in love with those two characters and like their story. And when they're kind of separated, I was just so heartbroken. I mean, I get why you had to do it, but it was very sad.
I know. And that was I will say that was the one thing I was very tempted to do at the end of the book. At the very end of the book where Camilla mentions like, what's next? Maybe she'll go find Sharon. And I had a moment where I really wanted to write another chapter of her doing that. And I'm sure, and I actually am not even sure. I know there are readers who are like, "What the fuck happened to Sharon?" But and wanted that kind of resolution to Sharon's story. But I felt like if I did that, I would have to keep going. And I went in my brain. Now the story was done,
Yeah.
and it had been told, and the conflict had been resolved. And I went, if I go into Sharon now, I got to go into everything that happened to her and how all those years factor into the story now. And so I just thought to myself, like, no, let's let Sharon be, like, let her alone. Um, but man, there's a part of me that I'm like, I want to go back and,
Maybe a second book just
oh,
focused on Sharon.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
I want to talk about the purity ball because wow, oh wow, that is some haunting and just terrifying scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, I mean, to me, they seem like emotional vampires. I guess they're kind of are vampires in a way. But it's also so like that part is disturbing, but then there's like this incestual part that's also very disturbing. And I mean, and I hope this is okay to say I felt like I was watching like almost like a sexual assault, like when I
Yeah.
was reading it. Um, can you just talk about it? Whatever you want to say about it, I'm curious because I will never get those scenes out of my head. I think it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever read.
Yay.
So
I'm so glad you asked me this question because this has been burning inside of me, I think, for about the past week and 2 weeks. Um, so the purity balls themselves, they aren't actually purity balls. I mean, purity balls do exist. I had one, where you get up and you swear your virginity, it belongs to your daddy, and then your daddy will give it to your husband one day, and you get a ring and you get cake and it's party and they make it look really fun, and it is really fun. But of the purity balls are a cover for what the leaders in the church are actually doing, which is, bloodletting. Of it is vampiric. Of that they are physically drinking these girls' blood because the magic in the town runs through their blood. Of it is all blood based because they swore blood to this tree that they would be prosperous. The men are physically stealing their prosperity. They're taking all of the good away, and so it is a physical vampirism. About the sexual assault, I really struggled with how I wanted to portray them taking the blood because purity culture 100% is patriarchal pedophilia dressed up as modesty. That's what it is. It, period, the end. When we are preaching, because these aren't young women that go through these balls. They aren't 18 and 19. They aren't people on the precipice of being adults. These are little girls. I had mine when I was 13 years old. I was the oldest girl there. Most of the time, these are 9 and 10-year-olds. They haven't had their periods yet. They don't know what sex is. They don't know what virginity is. All they know is that they get to have a party. And so it is, it was one of those moments where, as I was deciding how I wanted to go about positioning how they were going to take the blood from the women, of I wanted to be very delicate and very careful because it needed to be a symbolic criticism of how purity culture covers up sexual assault with young women. But I didn't want it to be so on the nose that it was really gross. I didn't want any actual like sexual assault on the page. I wanted the implication there, but without it actually happening. And so that was the reason for the location that I chose, of that it would be on that inner thigh so that you get the idea of what it's representing without it actually physically happening. And then also the men can excuse, oh, you scraped yourself, you fell down, you got stuck on a branch, things of that nature that would happen to a young girl. You were running around, you fell. You tried to climb over a fence and you cut your leg. These are all kind of normal things. I mean, I all the time when I was little, I would have random scratches on my legs, random bruises because you were running around acting a fool. And so it I tried to walk a very fine line because I didn't want I didn't want straight up like incest or pedophilia in the book, but I wanted to point out that often in preaching these things to these very young girls, that's what happens. And so I tried to do a lot of metaphor work and a lot of symbolism so that that way it wasn't as icky, but
Yeah.
was icky at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that, depending on the reader, you're going to put your own experiences into it, which
Mhm.
makes it either harder to carry or, you just take what it is on the page. I mean, I think you did it very well done. And I think, like you said, the metaphors are there. It lets it speak for itself. It's not like you're not beating us over the head with it, but those scenes are just really haunting. And I
Yeah.
mean, they're in a well done way, but it is one of like the most terrifying things that I've read, and because it feels so real. You're like, oh, this could happen.
Right. Well, and that was something too where I knew as a reader was going to be approaching that scene. I almost wanted to pause in the middle of the page and put like trigger warning, because of I had a number of people where I went, I'm afraid they're going to stop reading here because they feel that it's going to go there because it needs to feel that way, but it's not. I swear, like I swear it's not. It's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. It's still going to be gross, but it's not going to tip full.
Yeah. I, I mean, so I guess because Camilla is, I think, the oldest girl
Hmm.
here, has her dad just been doing this to other girls at other ball? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because it's all the women in the town. And so I mean, every girl that's born in Hawthorne Springs, it's in their blood. And so Camilla is, I mean, I think especially potent because she's a direct descendant. But they all did it. They all swore. And so it all kind of intermingles. But it, I also I toyed with the idea of why is it that her father would have been so okay with waiting as long as he did. And I had a more clear explanation on the page when I sent my first draft in. And then I ended up taking it out just because I felt like I was really beating the reader over the head with it. Is that he was waiting for Grant, of that Grant was going to be her husband. And so because that was going to be kind of this familial connection and that he wanted Grant to be the one to take the blood. And so it was okay, well now Grant's old enough to be a church leader. I'm bringing him into the fold. Now's the time. And so he was okay with kind of capitulating to Ada of, oh sure, we'll wait. Sure, we'll wait, but really that was his design all along.
Yeah, that's the feeling that I had gotten too, was that he was waiting for Grant, and it felt
Mhm.
like an easy thing for him to kind of stall on to kind of humor Ada for a bit to
Sure.
get her to calm down.
Right.
I have one more question. Well, I have a few more questions, but I'm going to ask one more and then we'll open it up to everyone else. Then we can circle back to me. I, I mean, the ending of the book is just as kind of brutal as those scenes. How satisfying was it to write that ending?
It was so fun of because I with such a pretty smile of that being my first kind of traditionally published, big five book, I was a little hesitant to be like, how crazy can I get? Of how far will you let me go? And I this time around felt a little bit more like, oh, I'm a little more confident now. I can kind of get a little crazier. And so as I already knew going into the scene exactly how I was going to do it. And it was, I I think I wrote that entire sequence in less than like 2 hours because I was just like so excited. And I had the best time.
I can imagine it was like pretty cathartic too,
Oh yeah.
especially considering everything going on in the world.
Oh,
I really appreciated how you let Ada still be there and witness it. Because I will admit, when I first started reading it, I was like, there's no way that she's gonna watch this kind of happen to her husband, but she's there for it. I mean, do you think she feels any remorse or sadness from his death?
You know, and that was something I really grappled with in who I included. And I in my second in my rewrite, I added in that line from Camilla where she looks at everyone and says, it's gonna be him too. It's gonna be everyone. If you don't want to see, like, I'm gonna do it anyway. But if you don't want to watch, you should go, and then no one goes. And I think that Ada in particular. And I wish I'd had a little bit more time with her character. It's just that in developing everything else of her story could have been its own thing. And I was kind of like, okay, I need to focus over here. But um, I think that she carried more bitterness in her heart than she probably showed. Just because she had to put on the mask, right? Like, I gotta be the preacher's wife. But I did specifically include the scene where she's sick at the end, and she's trying I think she's trying to get ready to go to church, and he tells her, like, no, you have to stay home, you look terrible. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, I'm sorry, like, I can't, I got to be a pretty wife. And you can see that there's resentment there, and that she's just been burying it and burying it. And so I think that it made sense to me in the moment. No, she's gonna stay and she's gonna watch. She'll probably, I mean, and I think Camilla mourns too. I mean,
Yeah.
the way that we do anyone that um, we don't have a great relationship with, but has been in our lives for a really long time. I think about it frequently. I haven't therapy session, everybody. Don't have a great relationship with. I don't have a relationship with my mother at all anymore. I haven't spoken to her in 13 years, and she's getting older now, and I regularly think about how will I feel when she dies? Like, will I care? Will I cry? What's that going to feel like? And so, I think that that's probably something that happens with Ada and Camilla both over time. Is that it kind of, it's gonna come up eventually, but
Yeah, I'm glad that they have each other though. Like
yes.
I'm hopeful that they can kind of repair that relationship. I mean, it seems to me that Camilla kind of gets why her mom can't really be
Hmm.
there for her more than what she was.
Hmm. Right.
Um, I'd love to open it up for questions if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, I'd like to jump in here, Chrissy. So
Yes.
first of all, not a question, just it's fantastic, this book. Like I think you do, there's just so much in it. There's so many different types of horror. You've got your multiple timelines, um, and yet it all feels so focused. So I think that is like a huge, like tremendous,
Oh,
just
thank you.
I flew through it. And then afterwards, it like expands and expands and expands because there's just so all the things you've been talking about. I got a couple questions, like nerdy writer stuff.
Oh,
One is
please.
one is well, actually one's about the ending. Do you have a version of it where you went harder? Because speaking as a man, I thought they should have suffered more.
Okay.
Even more than than what you did. I was like, no, that's you know what? They got off easy.
Right. I did not commit it to the page,
Uh-huh.
but I did have notes in my notebook where I was originally going to make it a lot grosser,
Hmm.
a lot more physical in where the branches went, if that makes sense. If you've seen Evil Dead, you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Hmm.
And so I had that, but then I pulled back as I was actually writing the scene because I just was like, well, we've been dealing with tongues and we've been dealing with mouths. Let's go that route instead. I had a sequence, again, it was in my notes, where it was a potential ending where I had them all, where Camilla calls them all actually physically into the church and then sets it on fire. But then I was like, no, the tree is more satisfying because that's where it all originated. And so I had a couple of different ideas of the way that I wanted the ending to go, but it ended up, I was like, it's got to be at the tree. Let's go for the tongues. Let's go for the mouths. Let's go for the actual impaling, the way that the women were, as opposed to, so
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like they, it was still satisfying, but I was like, wow, it's. I mean, it's that's one of the horrors. Obviously, the patriarchal horror is just teeth
right.
clenchingly
Yeah.
disgusting. But
Yeah.
um, also, before I ask the other question, I do want to call out like the Mary Sharon love story is one of the greatest love stories I've ever read. Like the fact that you were able to put that, like Amber said, in the midst of everything else and make it shine that way was just extraordinary
Oh gosh, thank you.
and heartbreaking. It's just. devastating when she like commits to staying in her life. It's just the worst in a good, because you wrote it so well. So it's like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah,
that
thank
broke
you.
me. That broke me. Um, but I was curious, like, why 2007? Because I'm always
Ah,
interested in why people pick certain time frames. So I was curious,
right.
was there a reason? Like,
There is a reason for 2007. So, and I love this question because I feel like, the 1700s makes some sense. The
mhm.
1950 ones make some sense. But 2007 was the height for me of female hatred
Oh,
culture at the time. Of It was the era of Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan and this kind of vilification and demonizing of women for doing exactly what we were asking them to do. We asked them to be slutty and then crucified them for it. And so it was the year Britney shaved her head. It was the year of the Perez Hilton blogs where you he would take
mm.
women and draw semen on their faces. And so it was the height of low-rise jeans where we had these really heightened expectations about what women's bodies should look like, and then they would get splashed all over tabloid covers of, oh, they're look at them, they've gained so much weight, they're huge and these slobby. And so because I knew that materialism and the physical appearance of the body was going to be such a thing in the Hawthorne Springs culture, I knew that it was like mid-aughts. That's where we got to be. So 2007 was the year when all of that stuff went down. So that was why I picked that time period.
That's perfect. Yeah, I mean, the rage is palpable. Like, it's almost a living thing in this book. And yeah, now hearing that, I'm like, oh yeah, that tracks. That tracks. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd love to talk about the kind of rage part of this too, because I feel like to me, there was like a few things that stuck out. Like, I think you have a power dynamic here between men and women, but you also have greed and betrayal. And then the idea of like kind of being forced to accept what you're being told as a truth to the point where you do start to believe it. I mean, to me, you can't really tell the story without all of those elements, but I'm curious if you agree with that or not, because I feel like you can't have power without greed. The betrayal feeds into it. So I'm just curious, like your take on how important each of those are to it.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly right. Of the it's There's a great essay that I used to teach when I used to teach high school before I started writing full time, and I taught AP language for years. And every year I would teach an essay by George Orwell called "Shooting an Elephant." And so he wrote this essay like way before he ever did like 1984 or anything like that. But he was a British Imperial police officer in Burma. And so, I would talk with my students about imperialism and colonialism and all of that. And but he took the job because he needed the money, not because he particularly wanted to be, a Burmese imperial police officer, but because he needed cash. And there the area that he was living in was going through the elephants were going through their musting season, so they were mating, and there was a rogue elephant, and it was killing everybody. I mean, it was on a tear, and it was just tearing the village up. And he's the authority figure. And so the town comes to him and is like, "What are you going to do about this elephant? You got to kill it. You got to get rid of it." And so he's writing about, I have my gun, I'm getting ready to kill this elephant. And he goes, I'm looking at it and it looks back at me. And so he shoots it, and the imagery and the diction choices that he makes in this essay are just stunning, because he talks about how he has to shoot, he pumps the elephant full of like 47 slugs. I mean, it's a brutal killing. He talks about how it sags to its knees. It looks like a grandmother. It bows its head, like all of these things that are really tragic. And he's essentially making the point, though, if he says, the great line in it is, when we put on the mask, our face grows to fit it. and that's exactly what happens with Camilla to some extent. Now she takes the mask off at some point, but that's what's happened with all the women in this town. And so, and I think that that's what a lot of people don't understand about indoctrination. And when you grow up in a community like this, and this is all you know, and this is what you're taught, you believe it deeply, even as you ask questions. There's still the part of you that deeply believes it. And so I've had a number of people who have said to me, like, I just don't think this would happen. I just don't think you would have a town where this would happen, where everyone would just say, okay, where women would just go on retreat and be like, okay. And I go, I lived it. I watched it. Retreat was real. From like my mom went on one, and they now they didn't pump her full of drugs, but I mean, you got locked in a cabin and you went to Bible study and you went to prayer and you got visitations from the minister, and that was it. And so it is one of those things where the women in the town that you see kind of rotating around Camilla, they're also deeply invested because one, they don't want to get in trouble. They like the attention that it brings them by being good. We all want to be told that we're good, that we're doing a good job. That's a fundamental part of like Maslow's hierarchy, like beyond Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all want love, right? Like that's what we all crave. And so yeah, it makes sense then that control happens because we're told, we're given all these things, and we eventually grow to believe them. And that's also how guilt and shame work. If you're told enough times that was a bad thing, that was impure, you should be ashamed of that, you do become ashamed of that, even if it's not anything you really should be ashamed of. Um, so it's, and I wrote if you have the Owl Crate edition,
I do. It's beautiful.
I love that cover. The essay in the back, I wrote a separate like little essay in the back specifically for Owl Crate readers where I tell a story about when I was really little. In one of my reading books that I brought home from school, there was a picture that I was obsessed with because it was a little girl and she had red lips and we weren't allowed to wear red lip. We weren't allowed to wear lipstick. And so I was obsessed. I was like, ooh, this girl with the red lips. And I thought she was beautiful. I thought she was gorgeous. And so my mom noticed I was like obsessed with the page and asked me, like, why, like, what's going on with that picture? And I told my mom, I think this little girl is pretty. I love her. I want to kiss her. I was 5. She beat the shit out of me and was like, absolutely not. You don't say that about other girls. You don't say that about women. That's a sin. You're going, and I carried that the rest of my life of not just that's a bad thing, but you are bad. And so yeah, you just it all gets internalized until one day somebody says something, you go, oh what? And then it all comes
What I think that there's a part of that too, of the religion part, where even when you start to question things, a part of you is like, well, but what if everyone's right? Like, what if I am gonna sinning and now I'm kind of damned to hell
Yeah.
and I've made a huge mistake and I'm not gonna get to go to heaven? It's hard to take yourself out of like that mindset of like, I am a bad Christian. I am going to go to hell. Like it's so scary. And I think it's scarier as a woman too, because our expectations for us are so different than it is for like our male counterparts.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been out of the church since I was 16 years old. I'm 41. Yeah, I'm 41 now. And I still, when I see those doomsday prophecies prop up, where they're like, today's the day, guys, I get scared.
Yeah.
Like still to now, and I'm like, I'm not in it at all anymore, and I still go, ugh. It's just, yeah, you can't really take it out once it's in there.
No, no, I've told people like the scariest haunted house that I've ever gone to was like I went to one of those hell houses and when I was in middle school and they're terrifying. They're
They
basically just
are.
telling you like when the rapture happens, if you haven't been a good Christian, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
It's
It's like
terrifying.
that end scene in Drag Me to Hell of
Yeah.
I've been to, and they're in churches, and it looks like
Yeah.
that, and you're going, ugh.
Yeah. And people are like being murdered and like raped. It's bad. It's
Yeah,
really
it's
bad.
nasty.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
If anyone's ever curious about hell houses, there's a good documentary called I think Hell House or
Yeah.
yeah, and it'll blow your mind. I there's a great line in here about where Anne says that Florence was her daughter and tainted by her blood. I really love that foreshadowing that you have there Did you have to think about how much of the interconnectedness of the story that you wanted to give away and how soon you were going to give those kind of details away?
Yeah, so I had a hard time with that because I want to err on the side of trusting the reader to pick things up and kind of understand, because I am one of those readers who hates being spoon-fed. Like, hey, don't forget that this person is also this, and hey, don't, and this is what this means, guys. And so I rather figure it out on my own. But then I also understand that sometimes you do have to provide some connective tissue just for things to make sense. And so in my first draft, I did not name Mary's baby until like the very end, where she said, and so like as she's dying, and she says Ada, and then and my editor said, I really think you gotta like start to connect all those things earlier. And I went, well, isn't the fact that Vera is in two timelines enough? Like, doesn't that make sense? And she was like, no, people aren't gonna make that connection. I was like, okay. And so oh gosh, in planning how they were all going to start to slot together, though, Jesus, I think I have, they're all stacked up over there. I think I have four, if not five notebooks just filled with my pre-planning of that I would, before I would write the chapter, I would pre-plan how everything was going to go. And then the immediate before that, the previous chapter and how it connected. And then the immediate chapter after that and how that connected. And then I would just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, making sure I was picking things up. Now, granted, a lot of that, making sure how everything came together, that happened in editing. It didn't happen during drafting. It had to go, now I've got it done. I can layer in how this storyline is now going to connect to this storyline, and that's how that's going to connect to here. At one point, I had sticky notes all over my wall of that I would, as I picked one thing up, I would like tear it off and throw it over my shoulder. Like, okay, that's where it's done. But it was, I wrote it back and forth, which maybe was, I don't know, I don't think I could have written it another way. I had to have that bounce in order
Yeah.
for it to make sense of how things were going to unfold. Because yeah, because each thing fed the next, and that was, I never want to do three timelines ever
You did it so well
again.
that I can imagine
Oh,
it would be a headache.
oh my gosh. I will say I think that the timelines themselves helped me so much because the voices had to be so distinctly different because of the time periods.
Yeah.
If they had been closer to get, I think it would have been a mess.
I hadn't considered that, but yeah, I see what you mean because they
Yeah.
are just so like, yeah. I feel like I would have struggled with the 2007 the most because it's like, do I want to relive how awful everyone was in 2007?
And there were a lot of times where I had a hard time being in Camilla's point of view, not because of anything other than I fully recognized this is who I would have been if I had stayed, and I would have hated myself. And so there were moments where I was like, ugh, I just don't want to write about Camilla today.
I get that.
Yeah.
Oh, Chrissy, go ahead.
Yeah, since this was so close to you, and first of all, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Um, how did you protect yourself while writing this? Like, what were some strategies that you did, or some things you had to put in place to kind of keep yourself grounded? And like, did you have, I'm sure you had moments where you had to step away or like go in and soak in the sun.
There was
What
a
did you
lot of
do?
that. Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was I was much better about meditating then. That was almost like a necessary thing that I had to do every morning, just to get myself into a calm, like a really calm, kind of grounded headspace. Um, and then I did a lot of gardening during that time period where I would just like, I've got to be outside, I've got to put my hands in dirt and be around greenery and plants and not think about that. But my husband can attest to this. He was like, you were kind of a miserable person to be around for the duration of writing this book, just because it was heavy. And I am thankful though for, oh God, sorry, my dogs. You heard that. That was my dog barking. Um, but the Mary and Sharon components helped a lot of helping balance that out. And so I would try to time it out where on the days that I knew things were going to be heavy, I would try to sneak in a Mary and Sharon scene just kind of off to the side, even if I didn't think I would use it, just to help alleviate some of that. Because yeah, sometimes some of those Camilla moments, I was like, oh, this is awful.
Thank you.
Monty, gosh.
It is interesting because it does feel like Camilla sometimes has like the heavier scenes in the book. I mean, even though I feel like a lot of the more graphic things are happening with Florence and Anne,
Hmm.
with like Anne getting sick.
Yeah, no, I will say those were fun to write. I love body horror, and so even those moments of that Monty, even though those moments were really gross, because body horror is, I just love it. I really enjoyed those scenes. But yeah,
I know I loved him too. I was like, okay, we're
right.
going there.
Tongue's falling out. Mhm.
Well, I appreciate you joining us tonight. This has
Yes,
been a blast. I was really looking forward to it. I really love this book. I'm so excited to see what you're doing next.
yes.
So I
Well,
hope
thank
you'll
you.
be back to join us for your next book.
Fingers crossed. It's due in May. Oh God, I'm so close to being done. I can taste it.
You've got this. We have all the faith
Ugh.
in you. Thank you again. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Yes, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Of course, you're always welcome back.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Christy.
Okay, thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.